Hello, friends. You won't believe it, but there was a time when Air India was considered one of the best airlines in the world. The level of luxury travel and world class food and the interior decoration of the plane was so amazing that even Singapore Airlines took inspiration from Air India. But today, the situation is so terrible that after hundreds of millions in losses, the government is forced to sell off this airplane to privatize it. Why did this happen? And how did Air India become an exalted airline at one point of time? Come, in today's video, let's get to know the interesting story of Air India. Of India's several airlines, the largest, Air India, is Tata controlled. Operating over 6,000 miles of routes, it has built up an excellent reputation for efficient operations. Established in 1932, the airline connects the largest cities of India and now maintains international service reaching London. Jet travel has brought East and West close together. And now the passenger crossing the Atlantic has the beauty of the Orient at his elbow, giving him the comfort that air travel is expected. This isn't the only story of Air India's history, rather, the history of the country's civil aviation. 1903 was the year when the Wright brothers flew the first airplane in the world. About 8 years later, in 1911, the first airplane was flown in India. Its pilot was a Frenchman, Henri Pettit. The flight from Allahabad to Naini lasted 15 minutes and carried thousands of letters. You heard it right. The first flight in India was actually carrying mail. It was carrying letters from the Mahakumbh fair. About 20 years later, on 15th October 1932, JRD Tata flew the first Air India plane from Karachi to Mumbai. Then it wasn't called Air India. Its name was Tata Airlines at the time. His flight was historic, but it wasn't easy for him to achieve this. He had to go through many struggles. 3 years before this, JRD Tata became the first Indian to acquire a flying license. Flying planes was his passion, it was his dream. In fact, he had even participated in a contest in which he flew an airplane from India to England. But he had another dream, to bring civil aviation to India. Civil aviation meant giving the commoners the opportunity to fly in an airplane. But it wasn't easy to do this. To do this, cooperation from the government was needed. But during 1930s, India was under British Raj. The British government was obviously not helpful. As you can imagine, they saw no profits in paying JRD Tata or giving him subsidies to enable him to fly his domestic planes in the country. At that time, Sir Dorabji Tata was a prominent person and he agreed to invest in JRD Tata's dream. Tata tried a lot to make the British government agreeable. The government rejected all his offers. Then one day, he went to the British government and told them that they didn't need their money and that they would donate their services. They only wanted some aircraft and permission to fly those aircraft. And finally, the British government agreed to this, and thus the Tata Airlines was born in India. After this, the first Tata Airlines flight was flown from Karachi to Bombay, carrying letters weighing 25 kg. And obviously, JRD Tata piloted this flight. In the same year, Tata Airlines started domestic flight operations for the passengers. Then, one return ticket from Bombay to Madras cost rupees 256. You can imagine how much it would have been in today's money. 1946 was the year when Tata Airlines was renamed as Air India. In the same year, Air India became a public limited company, a company in which even you and I can purchase shares. In 1948, when India was already independent, the new Indian government bought 49% shares of Air India. At the same time, JRD Tata started Air India International, which is for international flights. Air India continues to undertake CSR activities like sustainable development activities through fuel efficiency gap analysis with the help of IATA, Green Cap Services, Fuel Management Services, FWZ, Zabre Flight Planning System. One such airplane of Air India is Boeing 787 Dreamliner, which redefines passenger experience, environmental performance, lower operating cost, and better economic performance. With its sophisticated, futuristic design, Air India's Boeing 787 Dreamliner is the most advanced aircraft in the sky. Its wing, tail, nose, and flight deck windows have been all engineered for maximum aerodynamic efficiency, reducing fuel burn. The composite fuselage and smooth wing design is much more efficient than today's airplanes. The substantial breakthrough in its fuel consumption and maintenance cost would help airlines save money while providing flexibility to expand into new markets. The 787 cabin is pressurized to a maximum of 6,000 feet per 1800 meters compared to as high as 8,000 feet per 2,400 meters for other aircraft. Testing shows that passengers experience fewer headaches and less fatigue at 6,000 feet per 1800 meters than at higher altitudes. The 787 cabin environment allows more oxygen to be absorbed in the blood, reducing headaches and dizziness. Air India passengers will feel more refreshed and be ready to go when they arrive on a 787 Dreamliner after a long flight. The Boeing 787 is the first commercial jet airplane to be built primarily of composite materials which resist fatigue and corrosion that affect aluminum airplanes, resulting in easy and economical maintenance. Boeing 787-8 is powered with two GEnx 1B64 engine which have a thrust rating of 63,800 pounds. The next generic engine technology of the Boeing 787 is provided by Boeing's engine partners, General Electric. The engines and other improvements enable the Boeing 787 to fly farther, faster, cleaner, quieter, and more efficiently than comparable airplanes. Modern cabin noises control systems prevent noise and vibrations from entering the cabin. A provision is made to carry additional flying crew in the overhead flight crew rest area, which is equipped with 2 sleeping bunks and 1 seat. This makes Dreamliner a superior aircraft with amazing economic performance with 15% lower fuel consumptions than current aircraft in the same category, lower operating costs and lower maintenance costs with top-class luxury. Nationalization. The next major change was in 1953. It was a disheartening event for JRD Tata. The Indian government decided that the entire airline sector of India would be nationalized, meaning all the Indian airline companies would become government owned. The government then merged 8 domestic airlines into one, and thus Indian Airlines was created, that is, Air India. The domestic wing of Air India was one of the 8 companies. Additionally, the government had also nationalized Air India International, and it became a public sector unit owned by the government. Nationalizing major sectors was a major policy of the Nehru government. The objective of the government was to support this industry so that there could be more progress in the country. But it also meant that the private businessmen and investors lost their opportunities. As you can imagine, the industrialists and large businessmen in the country weren't happy with this decision, including JRD Tata. This part of the story is very interesting because JRD Tata and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru were good friends. Nehru always encouraged scientific progress in the country and was very happy to see how Air India had changed civil aviation in India. And J.R.D. Tata also admired Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru a lot. But when the government passed the Air India Corporates Act 1953, through which Air India was nationalized, J.R.D. Tata saw this as a betrayal. He clearly disagreed with Pandit Nehru's decision. J.R.D. Tata's opinion on nationalization was always against it. Nationalization of industries, the way it is done, those considerations made me oppose the nationalization of industries. Though quite accepting the fact that some industries, some activities must be done by the state. Later, Pandit Nehru wrote a letter explaining why the decision was taken. He said that the Congress party wanted to do it over 20 years but couldn't do it. The government wasn't actually against Air India. But Nehru did feel that it would be better for the country to nationalize it. Even though J.R.D. Tata was against it, he couldn't do anything against the government's decision. Air India was finally nationalized. But one thing that needs mentoring, J.R.D. Tata still remains a part of Air India. He was made the chairman of Air India International and he became the director of Indian Airlines.
Caviar on ice, the finest steaks, champagne, a menu prepared by the chefs of the Taj Hotel. Grand lounge designed by the artist of Shantiniketan. Had you traveled in Air India in the 1950s and 1960s, then descriptions such as these would have been used for your journey. Air India was known as a palace in the sky. As I told you, luxury travel, world class food, such that the international airlines like Singapore Airlines took inspiration from Air India. The credit for this largely goes to J.R.D. Tata. It is said that he would fly in Air India's flights to ensure that the services ran efficiently. If we saw any imperfections like a dirty corner, he went and cleaned it himself. Air India Limited is headquartered at the Indian Airlines House at New Delhi. Air India moved its headquarters from Air India Building, Mumbai, to Delhi in 2013. Air India Regional was established as Alliance Air, a wholly owned subsidiary of Indian Airlines on 1st April 1996 and started operations on 21st June 1996. It was renamed Air India Regional after the merger between Air India and Indian Airlines. Air India Express began operations on 29th April 2005 and was initially owned by Air India Charters. It operates flights from South India to the Middle East and Southeast Asia. At present, Air India has a total of 12,085 employees, among which 8,084 are permanent and 4,000 are contractual. Air India Express has around 1,434 employees. In 2019, the revenue generated was around $3.5 billion, with profit around $1.1 billion. Air India's fame is perhaps incomplete without its mascot, that is, the Maharaja. You would have seen this photo everywhere in Air India, on postcards, stationery, and even in advertisements. Did you know that Maharaja was conceptualized in 1946 by Bobby Kuka, the then commercial director of the airline? Over the years, Maharaja is depicted in other cultures and countries, showing that Air India carries its passengers all over the world. During the 1960s and 1970s, Air India wasn't merely an airline, it was literally a representation of India on how our country was viewed on the international stage. Air India was associated with hospitality, Indian culture, food, and even art. Talking about art, did you know about Air India's art collection of more than 8,000 works? Painting, textiles, sculptures, and glass paintings, etc. They have collected this collection over the last 60 years. And this was a very calculated move. The thing is that there weren't many international airlines at that time. So the airlines competing against Air India were giving it a stiff competition. Air India had to do something to stand out as an airline, to be different from the others. To do this, the advertisement department of Air India decided to reflect Air India's identity by displaying Indian art and artifacts in their airplanes and lounge. The most famous artists around the world of that time were commissioned to create artwork for Air India. Like in 1967, Air India commissioned the world renowned artist Salvador Dali to create a very special ashtray for the Air India's customer, and he made an ashtray that looked like this from a porcelain. But he didn't ask for a payment in money. It said that Dali asked for a baby elephant in return. So Air India flew an elephant calf from Bangalore to Geneva. These are the stories, friends, that shows how special Air India used to be in that time. The Air India flyers were often very loyal to Air India. In 2017, the government decided to privatize Air India. By 31st March 2020, Air India had accumulated loss of over 700 billion rupees in total. The burden kept on increasing every year to the extent that the government found it increasingly difficult to sell this airline. But finally, on 8 October 2021, the government successfully sold off the airline to Tata for around 180 billion rupees. This decision is seen as a big celebration. The airlines have returned to their original owners again, that is the Tatas. Only time can tell if Air India could once again become a successful airline after this decision, whether it could recreate its identity in the world or not. But I would definitely like to tell you one thing at the end, that if we look at the best airlines in the world today, that is the Singapore Airlines, Emirates, Etihad Airlines, Japan Airlines, Lufthansa. In this long list, you'll find nationalized airlines, those airlines controlled by the government, like Singapore Airlines with the Singaporean government holding the majority stakes, or Emirates and Etihad that are 100% government controlled airlines. On the other hand, you'll find private airlines as well, like Lufthansa and Japan Air. So, in my opinion, it doesn't make a difference if an airline is owned by the government or private. In the end, it's about good decision making and good management. Thank you very much. So, the salaries were being paid unnecessarily, leading to the wastage of even more money. Jitendra Bhargava, the former executive director of the company, says that the management problems in Air India had begun in 1970s. The top management was changed in these years. He said that before the change in management, the cabin crew members were rigorously trained. In flight service used to be the top priority of Air India, and that's why everyone preferred Air India. But after this change, the cabin crew weren't trained properly, and the process of recruitment wasn't as strict. The company started hiring people without proper screening, leading to an increase in expense and a fall in the standards. When the standards of in flights services started falling, the passengers obviously started looking at other airlines. In the next few decades, there were even disagreements between the government and Air India's management. But since Air India was a PSU, that is a public sector unit, a government company, Air India's management had to abide by the government's direction at the end. For example, in 2007, the government spent billions of Air India's money on advertising, even though the management believed that the money shouldn't be wasted on it at that time and incurred losses due to it. Here, there's a very strong argument favoring privatization. Since Air India was a government company, meaning the ultimate authority of the decision making was with some politicians and some government officers, and they did not have much knowledge of the airline industry. Which airplanes to buy, how many should they buy, on which routes should the airlines be flown. Incompetent people were at the top. They couldn't make the right decision because they lacked knowledge and they did not have much experience, and neither they did have any motivation to make the right decisions. So how could Air India be successful? Although another point to note here is that the nationalization of Air India had already taken place in 1950s. Until 1970s, the airline was flying quite well. It was a world famous airline, considered one of the best airlines in the world, even though it was a nationalized airline. Perhaps because of the top management was working well and was very much motivated enough. J.R.D. Tata was handling it himself, who had founded the airline. So he had the motivation to keep the airline in top shape. Perhaps that's why the Air India story is more about improper management and bad decision making. In 2017, the government decided to privatize Air India. Now, this completes the overview of Air India Company, a company which was built to become the finest and richest airline of India, but ended up becoming a rat airline in the world. So, your speakers for today, that is Zoili Dharmadikari and Jayavandi Dhoke, signing off. Go long and prosper. Thank you so much.